And meanwhile, in the United States, after the presidential debates on September 29th, Trump was accused of refusing to condemn white supremacists.
But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
are you
I'm
prepared
willing to do that.
Now, the main reference for this line is often Trump's statements following the violent clashes in Charlottesville, Virginia, back in 2017.
And you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
And this was even noted during the debates and the questioning when it came to Biden, because Biden has campaigned on this.
The president was asked to comment on it. He said, quote, "There are very fine people on both sides."
But the framing of that story is false. Now let's remember, let's take a look back. At the time, back in 2017, Trump condemned racism. He disavowed neo-Nazis, the KKK, and other hate groups by name.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
Now, some of the fact-check sites have noted this as well. They've noted that President Donald Trump was misquoted on this. His quotes were taken out of context and misframed. Factcheck.org noted back in February that Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden wrongly claimed that Trump had not once condemned white supremacy. It notes, quote, "Contrary to Biden's claim, the president twice specifically condemned white supremacists and neo-Nazis, and he has repeated that condemnation since." Now, ironically, many news outlets have taken Trump's statements after Charlottesville out of context. They've made it appear that Trump said the opposite, including in political advertisements by Biden, which were cited during the September 29th debate. This claim is that Trump said there were, quote, "very fine people on both sides," which included neo-Nazis. Now, in the full context, Trump had stated on August 15th, 2017 that, quote, "you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides," referring both to the right and the left, and Antifa was on the left. But Trump had also stated,
"You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people," and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally, but you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Now, the fact that Trump's words have been taken out of context have also been noted by several news outlets. USA Today, for example, reported back in April that Biden and many news outlets had taken the statements out of context in order to frame their narrative. Now, what are we seeing here? This is classic disinformation. Yes, we can say it's political messaging. When, say, one political party wants to defame the other, and so they take quotes out of context, they take information out of context, and they change the implications of it. When it comes to disinformation, this is how it functions. They alter the footnotes of information. And once they alter the footnotes, they use it to make political arguments, to make surface arguments. So for example, here, they've altered the context of Trump's statements. They omitted key information, changing the meaning of what he said. Then they've used that altered meaning to make additional political arguments. They use that altered information as footnotes to make political arguments. And what does that function? They're making it seem that Trump supports white nationalism, when in reality, he condemned white nationalism. He condemned the KKK. He condemned these groups that these news outlets in that same quote are claiming that he supported. It is the opposite of what they're stating. But again, we're seeing here that this is not only just being used in media framing. It's not just being used to get clicks and to get people to subscribe to newspapers. This is being used to alter the political debate in the United States, at a time, notably, when race politics are dividing the nation. This is feeding into violence. This is feeding into notions that the President of the United States supports white nationalism, at a time when, again, this is becoming one of the biggest arguments in the country. The opposite is true. The opposite is what Trump stated. He condemned white nationalism. He condemned the KKK.
What are your views on the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists?
I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. I've been doing it now for 2 weeks. You're probably about the 18th person that's asked me the question.
Now, this ties into something broader as well, which is memetics. Now, what are memetics? A lot of us think about memes, for example, these funny pictures on the internet. They make us laugh. A lot of times they have political implications. They're deeper than this. Memetics is the concept of how ideas can be introduced into a society, evolve over time, and eventually alter the culture of that society. The concept of memetics was introduced by radical atheist Richard Dawkins. And again, this is being used by different groups for what they call memetic warfare. And what is this? It is the intentional introduction of ideas into a society, the intentional alteration of these ideas in order to make them influence the culture in an intended way. For example, here we have the idea that Trump is a racist, the idea that Trump supports white nationalism. This is disinformation. Trump said the opposite many times. But this idea has again influenced the culture of the country. It's creating racial divisions. It's making people go to the polls and vote using disinformation to make them make that decision on who will lead the country. This is memetics led by disinformation that has again altered the culture of the country to create this false concept over the nature of our political system.